Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman. I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. I swear to you, man, this weekend just was trying to break me. The two biggest of things all showed up within a couple days of each other, man. We got Endgame on Thursday, and then we got the Battle of Winterfell on Sunday. There was a lot to take in, and I might have been a little worn out after Endgame and the 68 hours straight being awake for the marathon. I might not have been all the way in, but I tell you, man, this episode captivates you because it is just non-stop battle, and it's pretty wild. So I don't even want to waste any more time, man. Why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat? We're getting ready to dive in, spoiler-filled, into episode 3 of season 8 of Game of Thrones, which right now doesn't have a title. IMDb has it listed as 8.3, and even HBO Go has it listed as Game of Thrones 70. This is a massive episode, man. We've been building to this massive battle with the dead, man. The living versus the dead. This has been the fight we've been building to now for a couple seasons. And it all is going to take place at Winterfell. And oh my, does it all take place at Winterfell. This episode is kind of crazy. It hits you with a lot, man. Like, I got to the end of the episode and, my dad was like, so what'd you think? I was like, wow, there's a lot happening in this episode. I got a couple knocks. It's shot very dark. It takes place at night, and especially early on, the lighting is really dark, which makes it kind of hard to see. And a lot of the action is very chaotic. So while we are bouncing around to all of our different groups, man, we're seeing like Jaime and Brienne and Podrick, and we're seeing, Jorah out on the battlefield, and we're seeing Sam and Ben, and we're seeing Dany and Jon on the dragons, and we're just bouncing all over the place. And when we get into the battle, it is mass chaos. And if that's the feeling you're going for, it definitely accomplishes that. But between the lighting and the chaoticness, it is tough to see some things in this episode. And that was kind of like, you're like, oh my God, who is that? Who is that? Because everybody's lives are on the line. And there are moments where you're like, did Brienne and Jaime both just go under like a mound of like undead? Who dived over there? Like who? Oh man, someone just fell. Was that someone important? So that stuff was a little frustrating. But on the overall, this episode is epic, man. Like I said, this is a weekend of epicness. Endgame was beyond epic. And this battle is the biggest of all the battles they've ever done on Game of Thrones, man. There's so much to this battle. And it's literally 80 minutes of just battle. A massive, massive amount to take on. Essentially what we have, man, is we have the living, and we start out and we see them all kind of lined up, and we see the size of the army that, Daenerys has brought, and what Winterfell and all the, northern realms have kind of added is a big army, man, between the Unsullied and the Dothraki, and there's a lot of them. And we get this really cool moment. It's like getting real tension. You're waiting for the battle to start. And in the distance, all you can see is darkness. And then one horse starts coming out. We're kind of a wide shot. I want to say we're by Dany and Jon kind of looking out over everything. You see one horse. And I'm like, are the undead about to send a messenger? Like, what's going on? And out of nowhere, Melisandre shows up. I don't know where she came from. She got banished to the south. Came from the direction we all thought the undead were going to be coming from. But just shows up and basically, tells Davos, like, you don't have to worry about executing me, bro. I'm going to be dead by the end of the day anyway. But she shows up, man, and gets Jorah to like basically get the Dothraki to all raise their swords. She like says a spell. Whew, they all light up, man. There's some wonderful visual moments in this episode. And that's the first one. Just watching all of these swords, just thousands of swords go turn into flame, and you're like, yeah, let's go. I mean, you can check me right here. The Red Woman, where'd she come from?
Ao sogno silon miskas. Aexio sogno. Ilon misas. Kesirus et bantus. Zobrieisas e signotuledus.
Oh, snap! That's badass. Oh. All right, Red Woman. I'm okay with you coming back. Holy cow, look at that. That's awesome. Wow. You get jacked. It's a real good way to get you pumped right at the beginning. And then, you kind of cut back up to Jon and Dany, and you're kind of up by them while they're kind of watching. And what you learn if you watch the inside the episode at the end, the game plan was to try to draw the Night King out on his dragon so Dany and Jon could go after him. My dad was driving me nuts, constantly like knocking John, like, what's he just staying around? He's not in the middle of the battle. I'm like, dude, like, Night King's got a dragon. We need 2 people to man the dragons. Like, that's where John's gonna be. And anyway, you're up there and you're kind of watching this wide shot, and you're just seeing this like wave of fire running into the darkness, and then it hits like a wall and starts to kind of pitter out. That's cool. Look at that. Wow. Where are they? Oh boy.
There they are. It's horrible to do it at night.
And then you just see the dead coming. It's at this point that Danny kind of breaks from the plan. Watching the inside the episode, Benioff and wife kind of explained, like, Danny and John are up on the dragons for a little bit, because they're waiting to try to draw the Night King out so they can go 2 dragons versus the 1 dragon, because they know he has one. And while she's watching what's happening to the Dothraki happen, she has to go, because those are her people. So while they start taking out all these whites, the rest of them start hitting the main part of the battle. And everything is just mass chaos, and it's not going well for the living. The sheer number of whites is just too many. And you get to this second visual moment where, they basically say, like, light the trench. And they basically knock the trench around the castle. And you get this moment. It's kind of like a callback to season 7 when, a band of folks north of the wall gets surrounded by the whites, and the ice water breaks. They just kind of stand there and wait. And you get to one of these situations. It's cool. Again, you go to one of these wide shots where you see the flame just light up all around the castle. You're like, that's really cool. And then through the flame, you can just see all the whites are just standing there waiting. And eventually the Night King shows up. It kind of does like one of these point moves, and you just start seeing 1, then 2, then 3 just walk into the flames. And you're like, oh my gosh, are they just killing themselves? And like, no, they're not. They're laying themselves down to put the fire out to break a hole. That's exactly what they do. And the minute they do that, they start heading for the castle. And by this point, almost everybody has retreated inside, right? That's why they light the trench. So things are not going great on the outside of the castle. And there's the sheer number of whites just pushes in and just overtakes the entire castle. And then you get a lot of action, just chaos, man, because it's a tight area and you just have bodies and bodies and bodies. And, you're watching Brienne get engulfed in bodies and Jaime get engulfed in bodies. And then, like, one of them will save the other and then vice versa. And Sam and Podrick and everybody's just getting engulfed in them. And then Arya shows up. Oh, my God, dude. Arya shows up with her spear and just goes to town, man. Like, it's one of those, like, dire situation moments. And you're like, oh, man, somebody's about to die. And it's Arya, man. And it's so much fun to watch her. But the same thing. Like, you get this wonderful moment, and then it's just the sheer number is too many. And while she's running away, she gets, like, knocked and slams her head, big gash. And from that point on, she's kind of discombobulated. And we see, like, scared Arya, like, running for her life. And she ends up in this nice break moment because, for the most part, 85 minutes is just nonstop action. And we need a couple breaks in that. And the first one is Arya, after she kind of gets away from this first massive amounts of whites. She's kind of hiding in the library. She's behind the bookcases, and you start to hear, like, metal dragging and, like, feet dragging. You're like, oh man, the whites are coming in. And you kind of have this game of cat and mouse where, like, they keep getting close, and then boom, she'll move somewhere else, or she'll move somewhere else. And what's crazy is she ends up hiding, like, under a table at one point because of that cut on her head. It's so silent, you can hear the blood dripping, and, like, 3 of the whites turn their heads, and she's able to get away because she's like a ninja, man. And eventually gets her hand on a book, kind of throws it, creates a distraction, gives her the chance to flee. And right as she is, man, there's a white right there. You jump out of your skin, and she gets it, like, right in the neck, and just all of the blood comes out. And then that's kind of how she gets out. But even when she's getting out, she kind of gets pinned in a spot where there are whites coming from this way, and then they come out of the other way, and she just starts hightailing it. And this is that shot in the trailer for the preview this week where you saw, like, scared Arya, and you're like, whoa, man, this is bad. And she is running for her life. And it's one of these situations where it kind of syncs up, where you've had Barrack and the Hound kind of fighting for a while, and the Hound just gets to a place where he knows they're going to lose. There's no way to win. And he kind of takes himself out of the battle and kind of pins himself up against the wall, having one of those PTSD moments. And Barrack is like, Clegane, we need you. And he's like, don't you realize we're going to lose? What's the point? And right then, you see Arya kind of sliding down one of the roofs, and Barrick's like, "Why don't you tell her that?" And that ignites the Hound. He goes, he grabs Arya, saves her, and the three of them kind of move through this massive wave of whites and try to get into one of the. I think it's not the throne room, but like the equivalent of the throne room in Winterfell. It's like one of the big halls, and they kind of get in there. And right as they're going, Arya keeps trying to. Arya is just like so discombobulated in this whole sequence, and the Hound is constantly dragging her, and Barrack ends up taking like 3 swords to make sure that Arya stays safe, and then the 3 of them kind of get in, and we see our second man go down. Barrack takes too many stabs, and he goes down, and then the Red Woman again appears out of nowhere, and you got like her with the Hound and Arya, and she's like, "You said I would see you again," or she goes, "I know you," and the Red Woman's like, "And I know you," and Arya's like, "You said we would meet again." And then she kind of just lays out all these things that the Red Woman said to her that came out true. Like, we would meet again. She was like, and you also said that, I would close a lot of eyes. And she's like, and that ended up being true too. And the Red Woman's like, brown, green, blue. And you're like, oh man, blue eyes. Arya, go get me some White Walkers. You figure that you're just knowing that right there, that moment, you're like, there's still more for Arya to do, and she kind of takes off. And then we don't see her for a while. Meanwhile, everyone else still in peril. We haven't had a ton of like big Jon and Dany moments as they're kind of just flying around, breathing fire and trying to take out whites. And finally, like I said, they got hit with the snowstorm. They get kind of discombobulated and lost. And as they're kind of trying to fly through, they fly into each other, they fly into trees, and then all of a sudden, the third dragon shows up. And you see, man, the Night King goes 1 dragon versus 2 dragons. You get this crazy sequence in the air, man. And again, it was one of those, like, you get these monster sequences, kind of like Godzilla, where it's like, why are we in like fog, or in this instance, like snow, where it's not like crystal HD clear? Because this battle's crazy, man. At one point, either Rhaegar or Drogon like rip part of the jaw of the Sirius off, so he's like constantly just kind of like bleeding, like fire's coming out of his neck at points. It's wild. It is a wild sequence, but the Night King gets knocked off the dragon, which leads to like one of the biggest moments of the whole episode, where Dany ends up like facing off with the Night King right there, and she just goes, Dracarys. And I went to my mom, like, you watch, he's gonna walk right out of this flame, because if you've been paying attention, anytime he's around flame, it just extinguishes. I'm like, I think there might be some Targaryen blood in whatever he was prior to becoming the Night King. And sure enough, man, it is probably the creepiest scene in the whole episode. The flames, Dany starts to get worried, Jon's watching, and you just see like the flames extinguish, and he comes out, and he's got this smile on his face that is chilling, man. But like, you're just like, at that point, you're like, there's no, how can you stop them? Like, there is no way to stop them. And he goes and he starts to pull out one of his, spears, and Dany takes off, and Jon's on the ground. And he throws and he misses, and then he turns and he sees Jon. And Jon's like off in the distance away, and the Night King's kind of just standing here looking at him. And Jon's like got his sword, he's ready, and you're like, oh man, here it comes. The big showdown is about to happen. And the Night King goes and raises all of the dead. And Jon like sees it starting to happen. He's running full speed, and before he can get to the Night King, all of these dead pop up. And you end up in this situation where, I think at one point Viserys like really injures Rhaegar. Rhaegar kind of crash lands. That's how Jon ends up on the ground. And then Dany takes off, and she might fall, but she ends up off too. And it's like her and Jorah and Jon on the outside of the castle just fighting whites forever and ever, man. They're just going, and Jon's trying to work his way into Winterfell, and eventually gets there. He actually leaves Dany behind, and you're like, oh my gosh, something bad happened to Dany, and that's where Jorah is. And he keeps going, man. At this point in the episode, he knows that the Night King is making moves toward Bran. And he's like, that's where I gotta go, man. And he finally gets inside the castle, and he keeps moving that way. And while all this is going down, let's see, we get another one of those nice cut scenes away where we go back down to the crypt, and we get this nice conversation between Sansa and Tyrion, where Tyrion's kind of talking about like, being married to her, and Sansa's like, you were the best of them, but it would never work out for us because you got the Dragon Queen, and Sansa is never gonna bend the knee. So there's kind of like the tension, but then they had this nice moment where all of a sudden, like, you're down in the crypts, and I said it right from the get-go. I was like, if he raises the dead, sure enough, Starks start coming out of the crypts and killing all, like, the women and children. And the two of them end up hiding behind one of the statues, and they just kind of have this really wonderful moment. And while they're hiding there, we cut back out into the action, and Jon's cutting people down. Brienne and Jaime are still going. Sam is still alive. Davos is still alive. Jorah is doing everything he can to save Dany. And then you have, like, the whites starting to finally close in on Godswood, and you just get, like, I don't know where they were getting all these lit arrows from, but just lit arrow after lit arrow after lit arrow coming out of Theon and all of his boys as they kind of take out all the whites that come at him. And you get to a point where Theon finally does run out of flaming arrows, and he just starts fighting them. And all of a sudden it just stops. You look up, and it's just Bran in his wheelchair by the tree and Theon, and you're like, Theon killed them all. And then you just see a whole lot of them, and they stop, and they kind of part like the Red Sea, and they just showing you prior to that, like a shot, you see all of the White Walkers, and right in front is the Night King. The whole group comes in, and he's just going straight for Bran. You get this wonderful moment. So very few words are spoken throughout this episode, but Bran turns, and he goes to Theon, and he goes, at one point, I think Theon again tries to apologize for, like, everything he did, and Bran's like, Theon, and this is earlier in the episode, but he's like, Theon, everything you did led you right here, led you home, brought you back. And you kind of get to this point where, like, Bran's kind of gives Theon, like, accepts the apology type bit, where he goes, you've done a lot of great things, Theon, and he basically just kind of, like, acknowledges that, like, he appreciates everything he's done because he knows what's going to happen. And Theon goes after the Night King. The Night King breaks his spear, kills Theon, drops him, starts heading right to Bran. And you're like, and Jon is running. You're like, oh my gosh, Jon, you got to get to Bran, bro. And the Ice Dragon, which that disappeared for a while after that battle in the sky, shows up. Breathing fire everywhere, man. Jon's ducking and dodging, and he finally is like, I just gotta go. And it's almost like he can sense that the Night King is, like, right on top of Bran, and he pops up, and this dragon is just staring him in the face. And meanwhile, in the Godswood, Night King is going like this, and he's coming for Bran, and all of a sudden they cut to the walkers, and you see, like, a little wind. Now, I don't understand where she comes from, or how she gets past all of the White Walkers and whites that are there to get a shot at the Night King. But you see from over his shoulder, Arya comes flying in, and you're like, I mean, before I tell you, why don't you just see the reaction? Because it was the biggest reaction of the whole episode. Ari! Yes!
Oh my god, the dragon's gonna blow up. Freaking Jon tries to kill it.
Oh my god!
You mess with Arya! Oh my god. I can't believe that just happened. How did she get out of the castle?
Oh my god. Dude, wild, man. Like, you just see her go up. He catches her by the throat, then catches her arm, and they bring the best of all callbacks. She drops the blade, grabs it with her hand, stabs him in the gut. The same move she used, I believe, on Brienne one of the times they're training. And also a very similar move that we've seen in The Last Jedi with Rey. She kind of does a move like that where she can kind of drop and move him. And we've seen Arya do this in the show. And it's just one of those moments where you're like, yeah! And bursts into ice and everything drops. The dragon is up and then he just kind of crumples. The living have won. Hey, what's up, everybody? C-Man cutting in real quick. It's kind of dawned on me. I'm sitting here editing this Game of Thrones review that I've done while I'm watching the episode for a second time. And it hits me that I didn't mention how well this episode is shot. Yes, it's kind of dark at the beginning, and there are times with the chaos and whatnot, it's hard to see. But they contrast that really well with fire, both the orange and the blue flames, and it creates just different lighting and just wonderful, wonderful imagery. And with the storm, there's a shot where the dragons kind of pop up above it with a full moon in the background, and it's just beautiful stuff. And then on top of that, when you look at the end of the episode, man, wow, look at the character faces. I mean, just about everybody gets to a moment toward the end of this episode before Arya, takes out the Night King, where they understand they're gonna lose. Brienne screams at one point while she's stabbing whites. The way Theon screams when he charges at the Night King before the Night King kills him. The way Jon just stands up and looks Viserys, the dead, white dragon, and just screams like, "Go on, take me, like I'm ready." Just the anguish, man. You can see something was taken from everybody in this battle, man. The way Dany just lets loose crying at the end, and this everyone is gonna be messed up next week, because they looked death in the face and thought they were gonna die, and then Arya pulls off the unbelievable, and boom, now you all get to live, and you gotta have to deal with that. And the looks on all the faces and the way that stuff is shot at the end just captures it so well. It was worth mentioning. I had to cut in real quick. Now I'll let you go back to the past Seaman and let him finish the review. I'll talk to you later. It was a mind-blowing episode. I won't lie, a little dark part of me was a little upset because I had picked the Night King to win this whole thing, man. I thought we were gonna get more out of either him or the Crips, as far as story went. So I was a little disappointed on that end. And like I said, some of the commotion and visuals were tough to keep track of everybody. And it kind of sucks some of the emotional beats out of the episode, where it's like, Theon goes down and you feel it, but like you don't have enough time to really live in it. You watch Barrack go down, protecting Arya and the Hound. And again, same thing, like you get a moment, but then you're moving on. And then right before Arya can finish off the Night King, Jorah is doing everything he can to save Dany. And he takes like 4 or 5 stabs, man, to the chest, so that when everybody drops, he gets about the longest moment, probably the closest I came to tearing up the whole episode, as he dies in Dany's arms. What heartbreaking to watch. But it was weird because like you had all these moments and you lost some big characters. I mean, like I said, we lost Ben, we lost Theon, we lost Barrack, we lost Jorah. Oh my gosh! And maybe the one person who got like a massive moment, little Lyanna Mormont. As the gates get breached, she's standing right there, and this giant just backhands her out of the way, and you're like, oh my gosh, did he just kill Lyanna? And no, she gets up, man. She's all bloody, and she's just like, ah! She runs at him, and he grabs her, and he just starts to crush her. And you're like, oh my god, her head's gonna pop, like, the Mountain did to Oberyn. And she stabs it in the eye and kills the giant and then dies herself. But it's this beautiful moment of watching the smallest person on the battlefield, and maybe the bravest and toughest, take out the biggest thing on the battlefield as far as, like, people type of things that aren't dragons. And it was this wonderful moment. So you lose Lyanna Mormont, and that almost kind of gets you. And Jorah is probably the closest because we get to at least live in that for like a moment or two. But it was interesting. Like this episode was so massive and so action packed. The emotional beats I don't think really hit the way I thought they were going to. But nonetheless, this episode was epic, man. It was big. It was beyond action packed. 85 minutes of action, man. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, this was the type of battle that this episode deserved, as far as, life and death fighting each other, and somehow life prevails. Death's undefeated, and or I guess Father Time is undefeated. But here, the Hound at one point was like, we can't fight death. Like, death always wins. Not this time, man. Good old Arya Stark. I was just blown away, man. I'm so glad that she was the one that got it, because Jon Snow gets all these moments, and to see Arya be the one to put it in, it was wonderful. So now we go into episode 4, looking at how do you regroup after the Battle of Winterfell, and how do you get ready to take on Cersei. And the previews for next week, we see Dany kind of being welcomed now by the Northerners now that they've won, saying, we've won the Great War. Like, the Great War is over. Now we go fight the last one. You're like, oh, let's go. So probably got 2 episodes of build up and lead up to the battle for everything. And it's not going to involve any of the whites or the undead. Cersei did exactly what she hoped. Send the Northerners up and, let them take it on. And if they win, then we just fight their decimated army. And if they lose, we fight the dead and whatever's left of them. And she got lucky, and, Arya saves the day. And now they will take on a very decimated force of troops from Dany and the North. So we'll see what's left when we get into next week. But there you go, man. That's all we got for episode 3, season 8. The Battle at Winterfell was massive. It was epic, and it gave Arya Stark the best moment of the season so far, and I'm so glad it was Arya. She's my favorite. I love her so much. So cool that she was the one to take down the Night King. So those are all my spoiler thoughts on Game of Thrones episode 3, season 8. Now I want to know what you're thinking, man. Did you dig this episode? What did you like? What did you dislike? Was the lighting and the chaos a little too much at times? Or were you just enamored with all the action and all the wonderful moments we do get in the episode? Everything you liked or dug, leave it down below. Everything you didn't like, leave that down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, why don't you go jump over there, man? Hit that subscribe button and then the little bell so you can get alerts and follow along with all of my Game of Thrones, reactions and reviews as we go through the rest of Season 8. For the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down, I'm the Seaman, and I'm signing off. Peace. Well, if you aren't still here, looking for something else to check out that's Seaman related, why don't you check out a video like this guy or this guy? And if you really want to help the Seaman out in year 2, hit that subscribe button and come join the Cinema Sit Down squad, kids. You know what to do. See ya.